pregnant wife has to face Dr. Alone millionaire husband's absence with Mistress causes heartbreak. Confidence can be a fragile illusion. Stella Hathaway learned this the day her hopes for a fairy tale marriage shattered like broken glass beneath designer shoes. She never expected to feel such a jarring combination of terror and heartbreak, especially not in a bustling corridor of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center while poised on the brink of delivering her first child. Her husband, Everett Langford, a millionaire dripping with charm and influence, should have been by her side, but his seat was cold and empty. That night, Stella discovered betrayal can strike in the most vulnerable moments, and heartbreak can be born in the same instant as new life. Stella Hathaway was born in a sleepy New England town that boasted more trees than people. She grew up believing in the power of compassion, kindness, and, above all, love. Her parents, Susan and Robert Hathaway, ran a modest bookstore on the main street, a cozy place that filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and well-worn paperbacks. Her childhood was comfortable not in the sense of excessive wealth, but in the sense of stability, warmth, and unconditional support. She inherited her mother's inquisitive mind and her father's soft heart. Sunday afternoons were for volunteering at the local animal shelter, and her parents encouraged her to approach life with empathy. She learned early that real contentment didn't come from extravagant possessions, but from shared laughter, a feeling of belonging, and seeing the difference one person could make in someone else's life. In her late teens, Stella earned a partial scholarship to a reputable liberal arts college. She majored in English literature, enthralled by stories of heroines who dared to follow their hearts despite impossible odds. Little did she know that she, too, would be tested by life's storms in a tale that would rival the drama of her favorite novels. When Stella moved to New York after graduation, bright-eyed and full of dreams, she planned to find a modest editing job, make a home in a charming little apartment, and perhaps meet someone who loved her for her generous spirit. She never expected to cross paths with Everett Langford, a charismatic millionaire who dazzled crowds with his confident stride and seemingly bottomless pockets. Their meeting would sweep her into a world she had never imagined, a realm of wealth, power, and heartbreak that tore at her beliefs, forcing her to confront what love meant when tested by lies. Stella first encountered Everett Langford at an upscale charity event hosted at the famed Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. She had been invited by an old college friend, Marianne, who volunteered at an organization that provided scholarships to underprivileged youth. The event's grandeur overwhelmed Stella from the moment she entered the lobby. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and marble floors mirrored the glittering evening gowns and tailored tuxedos of high society. She clutched a simple black clutch against her modest navy dress, trying to blend in. She noticed Everett immediately. He wore a bespoke Armani suit and had a Rolex watch that caught the overhead lights with every subtle shift of his arm. He stood conversing with New York's elite, yet managed to look supremely at ease. Unlike many of the older benefactors around him, he seemed youthful, with a confident grin that revealed charming dimples. Introductions were made. When Marianne introduced Stella to Everett, his gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat longer than politeness required. "Stella Hathaway," he said in a smooth baritone. "That's a lovely name." Rolls off the tongue, his flattery made her blush. She was not used to such direct attention from a man so clearly in command of the room. As they talked about the scholarship program, he asked about her career, her dreams, and even listened with interest when she described her fondness for volunteer work. It was refreshing, even disarming, to find a wealthy man who seemed truly interested in philanthropic efforts, not just in signing checks for tax breaks. By the evening's end, he slipped her his business card, a bold move that hinted at more than just professional curiosity. Stella, slightly giddy, slid the card into her clutch without knowing that this small rectangle of embossed cardstock would change her life forever. Everett didn't waste time. He called Stella within a day, inviting her for coffee at a cafe near Central Park. Cliché or not, she accepted. The next morning, she found herself seated across from him at a small wooden table, sipping cappuccino while the green expanse of the park loomed behind them through floor-to-ceiling windows. He asked about her work editing manuscripts for a small publishing house. He teased her about the ink smudges on her fingertips and the permanent indentation on her right shoulder from carrying too many books. She laughed, surprised by how easily conversation flowed between them. In turn, he spoke about his inheritance, Langford Enterprises, a suite of luxury hotels and commercial properties that his family had run for decades. He explained that he was expected to expand the empire, forge new alliances, and secure the family's name for future generations. Yet for all this talk of business, Stella sensed an undercurrent of loneliness in him. She couldn't pinpoint it, but saw it flicker in his eyes when he paused to reflect, as if he carried an unspoken burden. Perhaps it was the expectation of his family legacy or the stifling social scene that demanded a certain image from him. Before they parted, Everett placed a gentle hand on Stella's wrist and asked if he could see her again. She found herself smiling, nodding, and once more feeling that pleasant rush of excitement. Their courtship was swift and passionate. He took her on whirlwind tours of his favorite art galleries, introduced her to five-star dining, and whisked her off to weekend getaways in upstate New York. Stella often felt out of place in the realm of luxurious indulgences, yet Everett assured her that he admired her sincerity. "Don't ever change," he would say, his eyes locked on hers, "because your heart is what makes you special." Within a year, Everett proposed to Stella in an ostentatious display that made headlines in local society columns. He arranged for a private dinner at Bryant Park, complete with a string quartet and a small fireworks show that lit up the evening sky. As the final fireworks sparkled, he knelt on one knee, opened a velvet box, and revealed a cushion-cut diamond ring so large that Stella's breath caught in her throat. She said yes, tears of joy shining in her eyes. For a moment, she believed she had walked into a fairy tale, where love conquered all differences, where sincerity and fortune lived in harmony. The wedding itself was a lavish affair at the Langford Regent Hotel, one of the family's most prestigious properties. Stella's simple tastes were eclipsed by Everett's desire to impress. Flower arrangements draped every corner of the grand ballroom. The tables were adorned with gold-trimmed linens, and each course of the wedding dinner had been meticulously paired with rare wines. High society luminaries attended, mingling with a few of Stella's closest friends and family who looked around in wide-eyed astonishment. Yet, behind the shimmering facade, Stella felt a faint tremor of unease. Perhaps it was the pitying glance from an elderly aunt who whispered that she hoped Stella could handle Everett's restless ways. Perhaps it was the slight tension in Everett's shoulders whenever his father approached to deliver stern reminders about upholding the family name. Or perhaps it was the pre-nuptial agreement thrust into Stella's hands mere days before the ceremony, an agreement that even her father gently urged her to reconsider. She had not grown up with wealth, and the legal jargon confused her, leaving her anxious. But she believed in Everett, his kindness, his excitement about sharing a future with her, and so she signed, trusting that she'd never need to understand the intricacies of that thick legal document. After the wedding, Stella moved into the Langford family estate. It was more a fortress than a home, sprawled across acres of landscaped gardens, hidden behind tall iron gates that opened only with a special security code. The estate included a golf course, a horse stable, and a labyrinthine hedge maze that Stella found both enchanting and eerie. She tried to make the mansion feel like home, placing framed photographs of her family on the mantel, adding a reading nook in a quiet corner, and insisting that the staff not treat her like royalty. Yet, she found herself overwhelmed by the army of maids, chefs, and gardeners who bustled around from dawn to dusk. She felt a pang of guilt whenever a maid rushed forward to pick up something she dropped, or a chef insisted on cooking lavish meals she didn't request. Everett, for his part, seemed busier than ever. He jetted around, finalizing expansions of Langford enterprises in foreign markets. When he was home, he was charming, sprinkling their conversation with talk of the future vacations in Europe, philanthropic galas, and eventually children. Stella clung to those fleeting moments, though a disquieting feeling arose whenever she tried to discuss more personal matters. Sometimes she thought, why does this mansion feel empty, despite so many people? The staff always spoke to her politely, but their eyes flickered with caution, as though mindful that a misstep could cost them their livelihoods. The lavish furnishings, with gilded mirrors and priceless artwork, reminded her of a museum rather than a cozy dwelling. Still, Stella believed in the power of small acts of warmth. She organized staff luncheons where she personally thanked each housekeeper, cook, and gardener. She began volunteering at a nearby children's hospital, continuing her personal mission of compassion. Whenever she told Everett about these volunteer sessions, he'd nod absently, offering half-hearted statements like, "Yes, that's good for our public image. Keep it up." Despite his detachment, Stella pressed on, hoping their bond would deepen over time. After all, no relationship was perfect. She had grown up in a loving, but by no means flawless, home and believed that every marriage required patience, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. One day, Stella felt the first sign something was amiss. She had spent hours preparing a dinner for Everett's homecoming roast chicken with fresh herbs from the garden, fluffy mashed potatoes, and a vibrant salad drizzled with homemade dressing. She lit candles in the dining room, set out his favorite wine, and even wore a simple yet elegant dress she thought he liked. He never showed up. Midnight came and went, and Stella sat alone at the dining table, the food cold and untouched. Her calls went straight to voicemail. The staff avoided her gaze, no one offering an explanation, though she suspected they knew more than they let on. The hush that enveloped the corridors felt oppressive. In the early hours, Everett finally returned. She heard the chime of the front doors and hurried downstairs, only to find him reeking of alcohol and expensive perfume that was most definitely not hers. His hair was disheveled, his tie askew. He merely mumbled something about business negotiations before stumbling toward the guest bedroom. Stella wanted to confront him, but fear and shock paralyzed her. She watched in dismay as he slammed the door behind him. Was it stress from the family business, or did he simply not care about her efforts? That night, she slept in their enormous bed alone, the pillow beside her untouched and cold. Over the following weeks, Stella discovered that business dinners and late-night meetings were becoming Everett's norm. Sometimes he was accompanied by potential investors or development partners, and sometimes by socialites who made headlines. The household staff, ever discreet, inadvertently dropped hints. Stella overheard two maids whispering about how Mr. Langford didn't come home until dawn and how they had seen him stepping out of a limousine with a tall brunette at the estate gates. Another time, she intercepted glances in the hallway that suggested pity, as though everyone knew something she didn't. One evening, a long-time cook named Martha quietly pulled Stella aside. Martha was older, with grey streaks in her hair and motherly concern etched across her face. "Mrs. Langford," she said softly, "take care of yourself. The men in this house don't always treat their wives with kindness." Stella was startled. "What do you mean?" Martha looked away, as though regretting her words, then hurried off without another explanation. That cryptic warning gnawed at Stella, fueling an undercurrent of anxiety she couldn't dispel. She wanted to believe that Everett might simply be in over his head, handling more responsibilities than he could manage, or clinging to the high society lifestyle he inherited. She tried to push away dark thoughts of infidelity. The idea of him cheating, after all, contradicted the sweet, attentive fiancé he had been. And so she tolerated the excuses, the missed dinners, the empty bed. She made her own routines: morning yoga in the garden, reading in the estate library, volunteering in the afternoons. If Everett asked about her day, she recounted it with forced cheeriness, hoping that genuine warmth would bridge the emotional gap forming between them. It was a sudden wave of dizziness that led Stella to take a pregnancy test. She had been feeling more fatigued than usual, occasionally lightheaded, and even her appetite fluctuated strangely. Intrigued, but also quietly excited at the prospect, she bought a test from a nearby pharmacy. The little plus sign on the strip confirmed that a new life was forming inside her. Despite the worry about Everett's erratic behavior, Stella felt an upswell of pure joy. She imagined a child inheriting Everett's quick smile or her own gentle heart. She daydreamed about the possibility that the innocence of a baby could soften Everett's hardened edges. That evening, she tried to create another special moment. She prepared a delicate meal of pasta, tossed with fresh basil and cherry tomatoes, lit the dining room candles, and placed the positive pregnancy test in a small velvet box next to Everett's dinner plate. He arrived 2 hours late, tie undone, hair ruffled from a wind that had carried him who knew where. With a sigh, he slumped into the chair, ignoring her anxious smile. "Long day," he muttered, pouring himself a hefty glass of red wine. Stella nudged the box toward him, her heart racing. "I have something to show you." Everett opened the box, stared at the test for a moment, then exhaled sharply. "Is this a pregnancy test?" he asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "We're going to have a baby." Rather than the elation she hoped for, Everett's expression grew tense. He managed a small, forced smile and said, "Well, that's something. I guess we should find the best doctor. People say Dr. Whitmore at Cedars Sinai is good." She waited for him to beam with excitement or scoop her into his arms, but it never happened. He took a sip of his wine, as if needing liquid courage to face the notion of fatherhood. For a moment, Stella felt her heart fracture. Yet she consoled herself. At least he acknowledged it and seemed willing to handle the practicalities. Perhaps, with time, he would embrace the idea of their growing family. Word of Stella's pregnancy spread quickly among the household staff. Some offered genuine congratulations, while others seemed fearful, as though they worried what changes might come with a new heir in the Langford family. Everett's father, Gerald Langford, arranged a celebratory dinner at the mansion. Family members, close associates, and a handful of local dignitaries attended. Over fancy hors d'oeuvre and champagne toasts, Gerald announced that the Langford lineage would soon continue through his forthcoming grandchild. On the surface, it was a moment of pride and unity. Yet Stella noticed Everett ducking out multiple times to take phone calls. Each time he returned, his jaw set tighter, as though dealing with an infuriating business matter. She tried to brush it aside, focusing instead on the well-wishers who approached her with cautious but polite remarks. After the festivities, she found Everett in the estate gardens, phone in hand. She overheard him whispering, "No, Jennifer, not tonight." When he saw Stella, he hung up abruptly. "Who's Jennifer?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. He paused, then forced a laugh. "She's an investor, trying to push some new proposals on me." Though the explanation sounded rational, Stella sensed more than a spark of tension in his manner. The name Jennifer lodged in her mind, an unwelcome guest she couldn't dispel. As her pregnancy progressed, Stella tried to approach life with optimism. She read parenting books, joined a gentle yoga class geared toward expectant mothers, and set aside a sunlit room in the mansion for a nursery. She filled the corners with plush animals and arranged small hand-painted stars on the walls, imagining the wonder in her future child's eyes. Everett paid for the finest prenatal care, scheduling her with Dr. Whitmore at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, a real and highly respected hospital in Los Angeles known for its comprehensive maternity services. However, he seldom attended the appointments himself. Usually, he delegated a driver to take Stella and told her he was too inundated with meetings to come along. Every so often, though, he displayed fleeting glimpses of tenderness. He would place a careful hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick, and his face would soften. Stella clung to those moments, telling herself that once the baby arrived, perhaps fatherhood would awaken a more attentive, loving side of Everett. But at night, when he was out until the early hours, that hope wavered. She heard stories from acquaintances that they'd spotted him at exclusive nightclubs, always in the company of a beautiful woman, sometimes a blonde, sometimes a brunette, and often at the White Oak Lounge, a trendy hotspot favored by wealthy socialites. Stella tried to confront him gently about the rumors, but each time he brushed her off with vague explanations. "It's just networking," he would say. "Clients expect a certain level of entertainment. Stop worrying." Yet her heart grew heavy with dread. She could sense the intangible barrier between them, growing thicker, like walls in a labyrinth she might never escape. At around 6 months pregnant, Stella experienced an unsettling development that confirmed her worst fears. She opened her car door one morning to find a blank white envelope on the driver's seat. Inside were photographs depicting Everett at the White Oak Lounge, his arm wrapped intimately around the waist of a tall, dark-haired woman, their lips dangerously close. A spark of nausea roiled in Stella's stomach. She slammed the door shut, her hands trembling. Who had taken these photographs, and who had placed them in her car? She scanned the estate grounds, half expecting to see a paparazzo or a disgruntled staff member lurking in the shadows. But the driveway was silent, the hedges immaculately trimmed. She stuffed the envelope in her purse, her mind racing. Should she confront Everett? A wave of vulnerability hit her. Her father had always taught her to face challenges head-on, but the fear of losing everything, of making a spectacle that might harm her child, weighed her down like an anchor. Stella waited until evening, her heart pounding, the pictures burning a hole in her thoughts. She tried to remain calm when Everett returned. He waltzed into the living room with that casual indifference she had come to despise. Stella produced the envelope and handed it to him without a word. He flicked through the images, a flicker of panic in his eyes, but quickly replaced by an indignant sneer. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Someone's trying to smear me. Probably a rival from another hotel chain." Stella's voice shook, but she managed to speak. This is the investor you mentioned before," he scoffed. "Yes, Jennifer Marsh. She's investing in a new property we're developing in Chicago. These photos are obviously taken out of context. You know how these gossip rags twist everything." She wanted to believe him, but even the best illusions fray under enough pressure. The pictures told a story too intimate to dismiss. "Please just be honest with me," she whispered. He rubbed his forehead, exhaling sharply. "I'm being honest. I told you this is strictly business. I have no time for this nonsense." With that, he tore the photos in half and tossed them into the nearest waste bin, storming out of the room. Stella stared at the ragged remnants, her mind in turmoil. She felt a sharp kick from the baby, as if it, too, sensed her heartbreak. A few days later, while volunteering at the Children's Hospital, Stella reconnected with a childhood friend named Carolyn West. They had grown up in the same small town, though Carolyn had moved away in her teens. Stella recognized Carolyn's voice in the hospital hallway before she even saw her face. Overjoyed at the reunion, Stella hugged Carolyn tightly, tears threatening to spill. Carolyn had become a social worker, dedicating her career to helping vulnerable families. When Stella mentioned her pregnancy, Carolyn's face lit with warmth, but it quickly turned to concern when Stella revealed the troubles in her marriage. They went for a walk around the hospital grounds after Stella's volunteer shift ended. Under the shadow of an old oak tree, Stella confided her fears, the suspicious photos, and Everett's coldness. She clutched her swollen belly protectively as she spoke, her voice trembling. Carolyn listened intently, then placed a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said softly. "If things escalate, I want you to know there are resources and shelters that can help, even for someone in your financial bracket. But more importantly, you have me." Stella felt a rush of gratitude. She wasn't ready to leave the marriage, holding on to the last thread of hope that once the baby arrived, Everett might transform into a better man. Still, having Carolyn's support was like stepping into a shaft of sunlight after months of darkness. By Stella's 7th month, a hush of dread lay over the mansion. Everett's father, Gerald, had gotten word of scandalous rumors involving Jennifer Marsh. He summoned Everett for a private discussion, which erupted into shouts Stella could hear from her bedroom. The argument ended with Everett storming out, slamming doors in his wake. That evening at dinner, Everett was subdued, picking at his food while Stella mustered the courage to speak. "Your father. I heard you both arguing," she ventured. Everett shrugged, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon. "He's overreacting. He's worried about potential PR damage to the Langford name. As if I'm some child who can't handle a contract negotiation." Stella eyed him carefully, wondering if his father's rebuke might spur him to reconsider his behavior. But instead, Everett doubled down on arrogance, complaining about how controlling his father could be. "I'm your wife," she finally said, "not some business associate. If you're in trouble, or if you need someone to lean on." He cut her off with a bitter laugh. "You wouldn't understand. Just stay out of it, Stella." She bit her tongue, feeling tears threaten. She was pregnant, exhausted, and longing for genuine intimacy. But all she got was a wall. A week later, Dr. Whitmore expressed concern at Stella's checkup. Her blood pressure had been creeping upward, an alarming sign that could indicate preeclampsia. Concerned for her and the baby's well-being, he recommended she reduce stress and get extra rest. Stella gave a soft laugh at the idea of reducing stress. She lived in a veritable palace that might as well have been a prison of swirling gossip and tense silences. "I'll try," she promised. She texted Everett to inform him of the doctor's concerns. He replied hours later with a curt message, "Understood. Will arrange extra staff if needed." He never inquired how she was feeling or whether she needed emotional support. The gap between them felt like an endless chasm. Stella spoke with Carolyn that night, tears pouring forth. Carolyn encouraged her to consider staying elsewhere, at least temporarily. But Stella hesitated. With her due date looming, she worried about how a sudden move would affect medical care and her stability. The mansion might feel suffocating, but at least it had ready access to resources in case of an emergency. She promised Carolyn she'd keep an open mind, and that, if the tension escalated, she'd leave without hesitation. 2 weeks before her expected due date, Stella had an ultrasound appointment at Cedars-Sinai. She reminded Everett multiple times about the date, texting and calling. She desperately wanted him there, to share the joy of seeing their baby move on the monitor, to hear the heartbeat in real time. The night before the appointment, Stella barely slept, anxious but hopeful. Maybe Everett would surprise her by showing up. Maybe this time would be different. The following morning she arrived at the hospital. The waiting area was bustling with expectant mothers, some with doting partners at their side. She tried not to glance too often at the entrance. Dr. Whitmore called her in. Stella changed into the examination gown, the hum of medical equipment filling her ears. As the ultrasound began, she watched her baby's tiny form wriggle on the screen. Tears pricked her eyes at the wonder of it. Then she looked at the empty seat beside her. "Is your husband coming?" Dr. Whitmore asked gently. She shook her head, forcing a tight smile. He was busy. The exam proceeded smoothly, though Dr. Whitmore reiterated concerns about her blood pressure. He also mentioned that the baby seemed slightly large, which could indicate a need for careful monitoring. "That means no undue stress," he said, patting her shoulder. "We want both of you to be safe." Stella nodded, determined to create a calm environment. As she left the hospital, she noticed a glossy magazine on a nearby newsstand. The cover showed Everett at a high-profile charity function the night before, accompanied by none other than Jennifer Marsh. The headline read, "Langford Air Courts Controversy, While Wife Nears Due Date." Her stomach knotted. The heartbreak was becoming public fodder. She quickly left, feeling exposed and ashamed. Back at the mansion, Stella tried to rest, following Dr. Whitmore's advice. She spent time in the baby's nursery, listening to calming music and occasionally whispering to her belly about how they would soon meet face to face. Late that afternoon, while reading in bed, she felt a stabbing pain in her lower abdomen. At first, she dismissed it as Braxton Hicks contractions, but the pain returned with sharper intensity. Her heartbeat raced as she recognized the difference. This was labor, or something dangerously close to it, arriving too early and too violently. She called out to the staff for help. A housekeeper rushed in, wide-eyed, and phoned for Everett's driver. Stella also frantically called Everett, but her calls went to voicemail. She sent a desperate text, "I'm in labor. Please come. I need you." No response. By the time the driver brought Stella to the hospital, the pain was excruciating, and she felt disoriented. Nurses hurried to her side, hooking her up to monitors. The baby's heartbeat was erratic, and Stella's blood pressure soared, a terrifying sign of potential complications like preeclampsia or worse. Carolyn arrived soon after, alerted by a panicked message Stella had managed to send. She clasped Stella's hand, speaking words of encouragement as doctors and nurses bustled around them. A whirlwind of medical chatter surrounded Stella, the baby's in distress. "We may need an emergency C-section. Prepare thee," or... All Stella wanted was Everett by her side, but all she got was emptiness. The hospital's bright overhead lights blinded her as she was wheeled into the operating room. The smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils, and panic clawed at her chest. She had dreamt so many times of a joyful birth, Everett holding her hand. Instead, she gripped Carolyn's fingers, tears rolling down her cheeks. Dr. Whitmore, masked and determined, tried to soothe Stella. "Focus on your breathing. We'll take care of you and the baby." The beep of machines provided a terrifying soundtrack. Stella felt pressure, tugging, a swirl of dizziness. She heard muffled instructions from the anesthesiologist, a blur of instruments. Time bent and warped under the haze of fear and medication. Then, at last, she heard a sharp, piercing cry that ripped through her numbness. Her baby had arrived. The doctors lifted a tiny, wailing girl, showing her briefly to Stella before whisking her away to be checked. Despite the overwhelming relief, Stella's heart ached. This precious moment was overshadowed by Everett's absence. She had just endured surgery, fear, and heartbreak, and the man who had once swept her off her feet was nowhere to be found. Hours later, Stella woke in a private recovery room, Carolyn seated beside her with eyes red from crying. The baby, named Penelope Grace, lay in a small bassinet nearby, sleeping peacefully. Stella motioned Carolyn closer. "Is she okay?" Carolyn nodded, wiping away a tear. She's perfect, Stella. The doctors say she's healthy. Despite her exhaustion, Stella felt a surge of maternal love. She turned her head toward the bassinet, tears welling up at the sight of this tiny miracle with a shock of dark hair. That moment of pure joy was interrupted by the beep of her phone. A text message from Everett finally arrived. She fumbled for the device, heart fluttering with hope. Perhaps he was on his way, or maybe he was sorry. "I'm busy in a meeting. Stop messaging me. I'll call later." Pain, sharper than any contraction, tore through Stella's chest. Carolyn leaned over, reading the text with a grim expression. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Fresh tears stung Stella's eyes. He couldn't even come for his daughter's birth. Carolyn pursed her lips, hesitating. "There's more. There's a story going around online. Everett was spotted at a private dinner with Jennifer Marsh the same night you were rushed here." Stella's entire body trembled. The betrayal was monstrous, and the heartbreak unimaginable. She closed her eyes, hugging a pillow to muffle her sobs. Carolyn gently stroked her back, tears in her own eyes, wishing she could shield her friend from such cruelty. Word of Everett's absence from the birth exploded across social media. Once a nurse, horrified by Stella's plight, leaked the story to a small entertainment blog. The headline read, "Millionaire Everett Langford misses birth of child for dinner date with socialite wife, undergoes emergency C-section alone." In a matter of hours, the gossip spread. Bigger outlets picked it up, fueling widespread outrage. Online commentators branded Everett a callous playboy and a shame to fatherhood. Even some of his wealthiest associates expressed disgust, cancelling or postponing business deals with the Langford family. Gerald Langford, mortified by the negative publicity, released a statement disowning any knowledge of his son's personal indiscretions. He tried to salvage the family brand, but the internet was ruthless. The scandal overshadowed even other society dramas of the week, with some petitions calling for a boycott of Langford hotels. In her hospital room, Stella scrolled through article after article, each one twisting the knife deeper. She didn't want the world's pity, but she received it in torrents. A few tabloids shared paparazzi photos of Stella, disheveled and pale, cradling Penelope in her arms, while Carolyn walked protectively beside her. The images served as stark evidence of her solitude during this critical life event. When Everett finally arrived at Cedars-Sinai nearly a full day later, he wore a tailored suit and a strained expression. He entered Stella's room as though walking into a hostile board meeting. Stella, too drained for a shouting match, merely gazed at him with an unreadable expression. He cleared his throat, eyes glancing at the sleeping Penelope. "I came as soon as I could," he lied, voice devoid of genuine regret. Carolyn stood by, arms crossed, but Stella gestured for her to step outside. She wanted to face Everett alone. "You missed the birth," Stella said quietly, her throat tight. "Our daughter was born, and you were with Jennifer." Everett ran a hand through his hair, the faint smell of expensive cologne trailing him. "Stella, you have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under. Jennifer's an important investor. This negative publicity is threatening the entire family business." She felt her blood pressure spike again. And what about Penelope's birth? Was that not important? He swallowed, glancing uneasily at the baby. "Of course it's important. I just couldn't get away." A tear slid down Stella's cheek. "You chose not to come," she murmured. "You left me alone. I could have died." His eyes flickered with something akin to remorse, but it vanished too quickly. "Let's not be dramatic. You're fine, and the baby's fine. Look, I've spoken to PR. We'll handle this situation, put out a statement that everything's fine between us. You just need to cooperate." It was like a slap to her face. He viewed her crisis as mere PR damage control. A swirling anger churned in her belly, mixing with heartbreak. "I'm not playing a part in your public show anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. Without another word, Everett left, not bothering to hold his child or apologize for the pain he caused. Stella spent another week in the hospital, recovering from the C-section. Carolyn arranged for top-quality postpartum support, ensuring Stella received lactation guidance and mental health check-ins. Despite everything, looking into Penelope's curious eyes filled Stella with a love so profound it eclipsed her despair. Yet the illusions she once clung to were thoroughly shattered. She realized her marriage had been built on a foundation that was more image than substance. And as the scandal continued to rage in the media, Stella found herself subjected to prying journalists who camped outside Cedars-Sinai, hoping for a quote or photograph. During one particularly restless afternoon, Stella scrolled through her phone, reading comments on social media. Strangers rallied around her, expressing sympathy and urging her to leave Everett. Others criticized her for not seeing the red flags sooner. The swirl of opinions threatened to overwhelm her, but a renewed sense of clarity emerged. She called a lawyer named Marcia Lind, recommended by Carolyn. Marcia specialized in family law and agreed to meet Stella at the hospital. When Marcia arrived, she was calm yet firm, offering Stella legal advice on how to protect herself and Penelope. "I know you're in a vulnerable position," Marcia said gently, "but you have rights. If you want to separate, file for custody, or even just negotiate child support, you're in a strong position. Don't let anyone intimidate you." Unsurprisingly, the idea of Stella seeking legal counsel triggered Everett's fury. She tried to speak with him calmly, explaining that they needed a more formal arrangement for Penelope's sake. He erupted in anger during a phone call, hurling accusations that she was out to ruin him. "You want my money?" he shouted. "You want to tear me down in the press? You realize who you're dealing with?" Stella's voice quivered, but she remained composed. "I want stability for our daughter, that's all. If you can't be a consistent presence, you should at least contribute financially so she can have a decent life," he sneered. "Do you realize how much this scandal has cost me already? Investors are backing out. My father is livid, and my name is in tatters. Congratulations, Stella." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The conversation left her shaken, but oddly resolute. She contacted Marcia again, telling the lawyer she wanted to move forward with a custody and support case. Her father's old saying rang in her ears. "You can't fix what refuses to be mended, but you can build something better from the ashes." Meanwhile, Jennifer Marsh faced her own backlash. Her association with Everett had thrust her into the spotlight, and she found herself labeled as a homewrecker. Business associates began distancing themselves. Rumors surfaced that she had a history of getting close to wealthy men for financial gain. Whether these rumors were true or fabricated, they tarnished her social standing. In a surprising twist, Jennifer attempted to do damage control by publicly claiming that Everett had misled her into believing he was single. She went on a talk show, tearfully stating that she was just a naive investor seduced by his charm. Paparazzi captured her leaving the studio in tears. Stella watched the interview on television, feeling a swirl of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of pity. The woman who played a role in her heartbreak now seemed to be drowning in her own downfall. Yet Stella couldn't muster much sympathy. She was too busy grappling with her own life, one that included a newborn who needed her undivided care. Once discharged, Stella chose not to return to the Langford mansion. Instead, she accepted Carolyn's offer to temporarily stay at her apartment, a modest but cozy place in a quiet neighborhood. Carolyn set up a small corner for Penelope's crib, and Stella tried to create a sense of home in the unfamiliar space. For the first time in months, Stella felt a weight lift. No more staff wandering the halls, no more sprawling emptiness. She cared for Penelope in the warm hum of Carolyn's living room, feeding her while daytime television droned in the background. She even tried to do light household tasks, though Carolyn often insisted she rest. Still, financial security loomed as a concern. Stella had left her editing job to focus on her pregnancy and marriage, expecting that the Langford fortune would cushion any breaks in her career. Now she felt the need to regain independence. She consulted with Marcia to ensure she wasn't jeopardizing her legal standing by leaving the estate. Marcia assured her that, given the circumstances, Everett's public indiscretions, neglect, and the toxic environment, she had every right to live elsewhere for her own well-being. Stella also quietly visited her bank to check the status of her joint accounts. Unsurprisingly, Everett had restricted her access. She had only a small personal savings, which she guarded carefully. The day of the preliminary custody hearing arrived, marked by tension and swirling media attention. Paparazzi snapped photos of Stella outside the courthouse, wearing a simple knee-length dress and carrying Penelope in her arms. Carolyn accompanied her as moral support, while Marcia handled the legal arguments. Everett appeared in a sleek black suit, flanked by his own team of expensive attorneys. His demeanor dripped with resentment. Even so, he occasionally glanced at Penelope, an unreadable expression crossing his face. Inside the courtroom, Marcia presented a compelling case. Stella was the primary caregiver. Everett's actions had endangered Stella's emotional well-being, and he had effectively abandoned her during a medical emergency. Everett's attorneys countered that Stella had overreacted, that Everett's business obligations were misunderstood, and that the media coverage unfairly painted him as a villain. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern gaze, requested time to review the evidence. In the interim, she granted Stella temporary full custody, with supervised visitation for Everett until a more thorough assessment could be made. An undercurrent of relief washed over Stella, but she also felt an ache, remembering how she once envisioned a loving family and a supportive husband. Now she faced the man who had once knelt with a diamond ring, and he was little more than a stranger across the courtroom aisle. Parallel to the custody drama, Langford Enterprises experienced a financial downturn. Negative publicity, cancelled hotel reservations, and disenchanted investors all conspired to bring the empire to its knees. Gerald Langford publicly chastised Everett, accusing him of derailing their legacy. Behind closed doors, board members threatened to strip Everett of any decision-making power. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Everett proposed a facade of reconciliation with Stella, urging her to appear at a family press conference and smile for the cameras. When he approached Stella with this suggestion, she saw the hollowness in his eyes. "You've got nerve," she said bitterly. "You want me to pretend we're still a happy couple, so the tabloids will back off?" He didn't deny it. "It's for the sake of the business. We can discuss your compensation if you cooperate." She stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. "You left me alone to face a life or death situation. You missed your daughter's birth, and now you want me to lie to the world to protect your enterprise?" His voice took on a desperate edge. "I'm losing everything, Stella. Everything. You think this is fun for me? If you just help me out, maybe we can get through this." Stella's eyes burned with tears. "Get out. I'm done with your games." He left, slamming the door. She stood rooted to the spot, holding Penelope, who began to fuss at the loud noise. Stella soothed her baby, murmuring reassurance to them both. As if the drama weren't enough, Jennifer Marsh unexpectedly contacted Stella, requesting a face-to-face meeting. Initially, Stella balked at the idea, but curiosity gnawed at her. Maybe Jennifer had information crucial to the custody battle, or maybe she wanted to deliver some twisted apology. They met at a modest cafe, far from the glitzy venues Jennifer usually frequented. Jennifer arrived, wearing large sunglasses and a scarf, perhaps to avoid paparazzi. When she removed the glasses, Stella saw the strain in her eyes, the faint lines of regret or exhaustion. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Jennifer began, voice subdued. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Stella's posture stiffened. Sorry for what, exactly? For the affair, or for the public humiliation, or for... Jennifer raised a trembling hand. "For all of it. It started as a business partnership, but Everett led me on. He said your marriage was basically over, that you were staying for appearances. I let myself believe him because it benefited my investments. I was selfish." Stella listened, a swirl of emotions churning in her. She thought about the hours she'd spent crying, the fear she'd felt when giving birth alone. "I lost everything," Jennifer continued. "My reputation is trashed, my sponsors pulled out, and I can barely show my face in social circles. I'm trying to rebuild my life. I just wanted you to know I regret it." Stella stared at the woman who contributed to her heartbreak. She found a measure of pity mixed with anger. Ultimately, she nodded. "Thank you for apologizing, but I can't say it fixes anything." Jennifer's eyes glistened. "I understand. I just needed you to know." With that, Jennifer stood, placed some cash on the table for her coffee, and left. Stella remained, feeling an odd sense of closure. The final string in the twisted tapestry of betrayal had snapped. Weeks turned into months, and Stella began to reclaim her life. She found a small apartment she could afford with the temporary support order in place. Carolyn helped her furnish it with gently used items, painting the walls a warm, inviting color. She created a charming nursery corner for Penelope, complete with a hand-me-down rocking chair where she'd sing lullabies. Stella also resumed part-time editing work, taking on freelance projects she could manage from home. Penelope napped in a bassinet beside her desk, and Stella worked late into the night, fueled by a new sense of purpose. Gradually, the media frenzy died down, replaced by fresher scandals and news cycles. Yet Stella's story continued to resonate with those who followed it, especially women who reached out via social media to share their own tales of heartbreak and resilience. Everett's attempts at damage control remained unsuccessful. His father stripped him of major responsibilities within the company, labeling him a liability. Board members considered ousting him entirely. He faced financial audits that hinted at deeper mismanagement, further damaging any credibility he had left. At last, the final custody hearing arrived. By this time, Everett had managed a few superficial visits with Penelope, though he seemed distant, unsure how to interact with his child. Marcia Lind gathered a wealth of evidence documenting Everett's neglect and Stella's consistent care. In court, the judge reviewed statements, financial records, and character references. Stella felt butterflies in her stomach, remembering how she once longed to see Everett cradling Penelope. Now she prayed the judge would secure a safe future for her baby. Everett's lawyers struggled to build a case for shared custody, given his inconsistent involvement. The judge delivered a clear decision. Stella would have full legal and physical custody of Penelope, with Everett granted visitation under conditions that ensured the child's well-being. He was also ordered to pay substantial child support. While Stella felt relief, she also experienced a pang of sadness. Any shred of the old dream, a happy family united under one roof, had been irreparably shattered. But as she glanced at Penelope, who gazed at her with big, curious eyes, she felt the weight of heartbreak give way to the warmth of unconditional love. That evening, Stella returned to her cozy apartment. Carolyn joined her in a small celebration, complete with takeout pizza and a homemade cake. Penelope slept soundly in her crib, and for the first time in a long while, Stella felt something akin to peace. In the days that followed, her life took on a comforting rhythm. She continued freelancing, occasionally letting her mind wander to the future. Maybe she would open a small boutique publishing house or write a memoir, to help other women avoid the pitfalls she'd experienced. She also found solace in volunteering again, this time helping new mothers who lacked family support. Everett, meanwhile, faded from the headlines. He spent his days scrambling to fix the wreckage of his career and the tarnished family empire. Rumors swirled that a group of investors considered taking legal action against him for fraudulent practices. If karma had a design, it was weaving its thread around him tightly. Whenever Stella reflected on the heartbreak she endured, she found unexpected strength. She had survived betrayal, public scandal, and the terror of giving birth alone, and from that crucible of pain she emerged with a stronger sense of self, a devotion to her daughter that no one could fracture. Penelope thrived, babbling and grabbing for colorful toys, nuzzling into Stella's arms at night. Her existence reminded Stella that real love was not about grandeur or spectacle, but about presence, consistency, and kindness. Stella vowed to provide these things for her daughter, no matter what storms might come. Months later, Stella took Penelope to a peaceful city park on a sunny afternoon. She sat on a bench, enjoying the gentle breeze, watching children feed ducks in the pond. Penelope cooed in her stroller, fascinated by the swirling water. In a twist of fate, Stella spotted Everett walking along a distant path. Alone, he wore casual clothes, looking thinner, older, his posture slumped. Their eyes locked momentarily, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He gave a feeble wave, then turned away, blending into the crowd. Stella felt a pang of sorrow for the man he might have been, but she also felt gratitude for the life she had now, the life she created on her own terms. She leaned down and kissed Penelope's forehead. "Let's go feed the ducks," she whispered. And with that simple act, she chose to keep moving forward, leaving behind the shadows of a past that no longer defined her. A single moment can change a life's direction. For Stella, it was standing alone at Cedar Sinai, about to give birth while her husband reveled in wealth and betrayal. She could have remained trapped in bitterness or lost in self-pity. Instead, she found courage. Through heartbreak, she discovered a love far more powerful than any mansion or diamond ring, the unconditional bond with her daughter. If this story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who needs a reminder that resilience can blossom even in the darkest seasons. Like this video, spread the word, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the human spirit. Your support brings hope to those standing at their own crossroads, searching for a reason to keep believing in the strength they carry within. In sharing these journeys, we remind one another that healing, growth, and love can outlast even the deepest wounds.